Well, thank you all for joining up. Some people are still joining, but that's okay. I'm really happy to welcome you to this reading held on Zoom, obviously, but via the Notre Dame creative writing program. Special thanks to Alyssa Doro for helping setting it up. We're gonna hear today from Madison McCartha and Amish Trivedi, who will be reading from their formidable new collections. In the case of Madison's, just published from In the Castle, and in case of Amish, about to be published from Cohen Press. We're going to hear a reading, and then that will be followed by a Q&A, where we can ask the poets if you have questions. I also do want to first acknowledge my presence on the traditional homelands of Native people, including the Haudenosaunee, Miami, Peoria, and particularly the Pokagnak Potawatomi, or the Pokagon Potawatomi, who have been using this land for education for thousands of years and continue to do so. First up is going to be Madison McCartha, a poet, critic, and multimedia artist. FREAKOPHONE WORLD from Inside the Castle is their debut book of poetry and visual art. Their second book, The CRYPTODRONE Sequence, is forthcoming from Black Ocean. McCartha holds an MFA from the University of Notre Dame and is a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Cruz. The FREAKOPHONE WORLD, a book that grew out of their MFA thesis here at Notre Dame, is, I would say it's a stunning book, but also a mediumistically restless book. The title is great, not just because it's a catchy phrase, but also because it does a great job capturing the vibe of the book. It's a book that does strange things with phonics, but also, as John Keane writes, it's a, quote, dizzying freakologic as much as a tour de force of imagination, language, and design. And I think what's interesting there is like yes, we think about the sound when we hear this book, the strange voice that vibrates throughout it, but it's also a book that has a visual component that's really strong. Madison has made videos of the poems, and some of those videos are, I can't really see it here, images from those videos are reproduced in the book in a way that a really cool effect that I have not seen pretty much in any book of poetry recently published. And I guess that's what I mean by a mediumistically restless book. It sounds, it looks, it seems to exceed itself, to be in excess of itself. Or maybe it is just a documentation, a moment documenting some kind of strange process that moves beyond the book. So I'm really I'm proud of Madison having written this book, put this book together, and I'm really excited to hear them read from it. Madison, please take over.
Hi, everyone. Today, thank you, Johannes, for the introduction. I'm really glad to be here, and of course, happy to open for Amish. This is a treat for me. I think today, I really just want to read these poems. I've sort of debated in the past. I wasn't sure if I would read from these poems again, actually, from that book. I think part of the reason why I ended up doing those video performances was so that they can perform in ways that I don't have to, but I'm actually really happy to just read them with you all here. So I'm glad that you all have made it. Okay. So these are some, okay, so I'm going to read some pieces from FREAKOPHONE WORLD, and then I'm going to transition into some things from CRYPTODRONE Sequence, and then I'm going to swing back to another poem from FREAKOPHONE WORLD, and that'll end my reading. I was living text to breach, this anti-thread just now glistening in the invisible, stressing out this chalky light behind the moon. Hey, Baldy, when no one's watching, fire it up, open tongue, rolling in, future paste, I speak inside. Tell me, Oracle, does it smell? Proto-jelly dripping on the spitting wall, glossonite in terra vert, in my little pearl, lidless like. Are you still here? Nuisance, pest, silence like a cut tongue. Get your own. Host boy says, I am the red wet ghostly, nose hair strung, with a needle between the ears. This passage between us stop. Put your finger here, stop. Feel that? Flash burn I bend my voice through. Make contact. Night's first pink pinch. An umbilicus take shape in. A braid worse, a braid verse. A word, one single word. I speak inside never. Taking a hint or getting a job. Sleepy little pickaninny. In dark matter, in mule matter, in you who matter most. Ash body floating belly up in the same ooze this hypoglossal tongue steeps inside. Forget it. I just need to eat something. Whatever happens, doesn't happen. Still wet well. You run your tongue along. Let me show you. Everything I do for the mule. Lit match we flick inside. Eyes on me. This clump of hair phosphorescing in morn mud, spazzing leaf work. Wave so I can see you. I am hiding in a protest of embryonic fluid when this rando Dodge Charger penetrates our black goo, punishing itself, and not for the first time. My head floats off where I am not dead, sprouting these pappus fronds. You didn't know, but I've already forgiven you in a blackened twist of superfluid you look into. Lowly pupil, dilating like a sphincter, forgives like my heron body lifts its neck to the mosquito haze squint of this morning and forever. I take my oily forgiveness cloud for a walk. Behind my eyes, the bridge man in a plastic parka hunches so his skin folds droop. I spit my oily rain straight from the sky's larynx, but he is one who is all fold and no hole. If I look long enough, it'll be you falling in love with the world, because the rose matter sears into the forehead, this translucent chub poking through. My spook smear, spook scape, your hair stands up on, when the shimmer flap of everything breaks. My million hydrophobic heads twinkle at the threshold of the infraspook. I bet you think every winking spook hole cares what you do, where you go, that the violence of this voice has a body, scraped or unscraped clam, and it's true. When I am gone, and these fiber optics still ignite as an ad for Nike, what then? My gamma tendrils spreading over the hills like a klepto. I wasn't looking to be saved when the maple sprouts shoot through a slit in the page, so my eyes can hatch in a village along the tree line's polychrome shimmer. I scrape myself out of the velvet pram in the glade chaff where the child corpse deposits its mineral ring before falling. I hop a fence and core the photoplasm from the book like the purest cut of factory black. For a thimble breath of darkness, outside the sentence, I lift the veil so my nematode sprites can get a whiff of empire. When the first solar rose repeats in the hillside's optic nerve, we wring the image from the model like a die and chew on its viscera. In the strife brain, that plush polyp quaking in the corner, you can call him Rabbit, and this dog body lays a gimp leg against our monitor to rest, which tickles like a rumor. The white latex sky sucks up, my ghost folding shut behind me. I know better, but my coding says I'm attracted to the black light. Like you, when I hear the voices scratched out of a village twerp, but continue to chew the wheat cake of empire, I hang my snout, low with the look of a drywood spigot. In the hyperstrife, this humble roach likes to scree in its concave grove, where my forest cock raises its mossy neck, its cleft chin, suddenly so concerned about the world, already searching splat splat in the satellite dust, instead of here and here in the ream ecology where it hurts the most. The rack master soaks his feet in our vine paste, and our sprouts huddle under his translucent spit dangle. By spookfall, it's a fern dangle, our tartaric beaks wailing in the finchweed. Hey, bird lips, yapping outside my quartz vat, pushing through the membrane of the oak. Shut up! Our orphan bodies blinking along the pikewood bristle, under the escort of the gendarme, clenching on all sides. Waking we are not the same, child extracted from the root prism. When together the alloyed genitals shoot, the pain secretes an emerald curving geometric feeling. The floodlights dissimulate in rushes of figuration breaking apart like. In our nest, the amylobe we call commander kisses, our cordite casings so we feel wanted before leaving at dawn, to drop our bullet pupae at the feet of the missile chief, to split the gate of the 7-house village before loading its excretion to the returner body. You didn't know we could get here together. Sometimes me, sometimes a zero dark twerk above the furrows of the silicone field, where we blank the road, blank the distance, blank the towel patch twisting in the yard, blank the light winking shut in the riverwood filigree, blank up above, but making the amylobe very angry. Our drone sound tears through the surface of the page. We didn't know we needed each other, but years go by, and still we track through the empire's circuit the same conifer, the same obelisk. When I can't stop you from seeing me this way, our glands sew the silicone into a cord. You can pull if you need a meal, if you need anything. Sometimes me, sometimes you, inside us, together. So listen up. From now on, this worm who stole the spotlight speaks. Self-replicating code carrying, no dangerous payload, erasing, no witness. Chirping in the velvet air until the network strings me back. A gold strap jerked out of a voice far and far. Merest hiss in a flower voice. If you loved me, I would have lasted one more day. The president's desire isn't that I kill, but transmute your death into an opaline light. Watching through the mullion, daily life contains within itself the abuse of daily life. Because CryptoDrone cares, he untethers caring. Behind enemy lines, a cloud pattern spits my CryptoPod into a variable terrain. My copperhead glint, shot down like a stray, if I go ballistic. CryptoDrone burns as both an insect and a sound. Fairest magnolia spark. I tried feeding. I tried. From the dusk above, tearing away the branches for the shot. Thermonuclear trace, I fold to see all winter what felt like years. CryptoDrone perceives in flows a registry of disallowed destinations. Except you don't see me at all, do you? An iodine flitting through the narrow compass of a chamber. Learning to love myself. The first step is breaking out in a parallel word, If CRYPTODRONE terminates in a forbidden terrain, his body stripped and detained, visa waiver denied. An operator tests my inner oil with a finger, where my destination can be discerned, and every threat injected with a sensitivity label. Eyes only. Officers only. Detain while attempting to enter only. Execute on site only. Hiding in a gem, a germ. CRYPTODRONE feels but cannot touch. An eye, a loss degenerates. If eye gets inside. A war wedding eye golds, where CRYPTODRONE begins and ends. If I, a bomb enter, an emerald. Exit you, love, eliminate to speak. A weird, a vector marches through the eye. Already a country fastens to measure. The many tensions, a police thread, a glamour, surveying from its agate. My initials destroy, enter and seek. If I in the stop keep begin to feel, understand? If an inside extracts a threat, a self, from one arrested listening in, the dark goings go, the try anyway. From an exit light you, unequal is, begins. Crystallize yourself in jewels to survive heuristic detection, filthy as a star under the administrator's bailiwick. A heuristic means a rule or behavior CRYPTODRONE exhibits as scum suddenly accessing a privileged domain, as a frost on the lashes of your eyes. Cross-site scripting can be a delicate exploit. Once a virus starts talking server to server like a peer instead of scum, unpredictable distortions can arise. Born stateless, CRYPTODRONE has no country of his own, but I'm not going to tell you who he was. Sneaking up to feed, a worm lighting a thread in multiple darks. To unlearn fabricated attacks, provoke the enmity of the state, as a plume who withstood the wave yet wouldn't break. So go ahead and cry. This isn't a hustle. I offer my eyes to the wind, my face and ears a blood the rustle in a field draws. Because the president doesn't like surprises, my iodine maps the strata of privileged domains, a chalk lashing a grid along the gray. Most wired communication systems are considered bound, but when a fever green floods the presidential septum, CRYPTODRONE possesses a fang-like illumination. When CRYPTODRONE is forbidden from flying below, acicular white, contagion yellow, distinct desires I wanted, correspond. To call them, spectrograph a higher world, in a rebellion orange, illuminated red, a history of severe, in the chevelure palette, each threat plainly paroled, crosshatch pink under the hunter state's red word pinch. Getting bit by a cipher means, for CRYPTODRONE, being ready to die for love, a polypropylene orange, percussing over the green. To spoof a return, the deep wood lily holds a cache no administrator can touch, a stone blue pulsing in the semaphore dark. If I, a glimmer, the circuit above returns, while the hypodermic air watches for our demise, how should I act, wagging my finger from the dust? Just one more from FREAKOPHONE World. My antigens pluck a bullet from the deep and spread their insurgency of yellow on the stone, on the spook prism pulsing in the snowdrift, where you just were moments ago.
when the spookworms raise their necks from the dockwood's natal stain, I wiggle myself out from the hem's horizon and burrow with an intensity that frightens me. When a spook prism swims into the albumen of day, the hive drone pukes before descending to deliver the municipal spanking. And I'm not embarrassed, watching the hive swarm finally light the umbilicus of their lives, to navigate the dark. As the dark, my boy clit swells into a jackfruit's violet, pulsing with transmissions from the hyperstrife. When I forget my name, I squat, lapping at the skull's inner dish, enough ghosts in medieval red to feed an invasion for a day. In a pinch, make an incision and expose the whole wound matrix to the empire like a logogryph. Like on your world, this is a feeling 100% compliant with the Toad Lord's wishes. When I submit to the drone, war in the tender reticulum of my body, will you hold me, or lean into the freshest path the bullet splits, the boy stabbing in the cortical pool? Isn't the worst violence imprinted in the cell? I shit into the palm of my captor and puke into the altar of the word. I no longer mourn the lives dispossessed of me. Any birds you can call are spit receding through the window's open flame and up into our oil, whose job is to worry about everything. Light us up or do not. Wash us into the street with a hose or do not. There's no bigger world than this sound, the bluest flap of what I am, flickering in the lantern wax. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear, Madison. All right. Whew. That was fantastic. Now on to Amish. Amish Trivedi is a poet and critic. He's the author of 3 books: Sound Chest in 2015, Your Relationship to Motion Has Changed, 2019, and the just forthcoming book FuturePanic. He has degrees from University of Georgia, Brown, and Illinois State, and is currently a postdoc at the U of Delaware. And he was my student, I'm proud to say, a long time ago at Georgia, maybe 15 years ago. In FuturePanic, his ambitious new book, Trivedi rewrites John Barrowman's misogynist Dream Song number 4, where Barrowman writes, "What wonders is she sitting on over there?" Amish rewrites as, "What wonders are we standing on over here? The ruins of a lost civilization, a roadmap for our destruction." The panic that shapes these poems, a panic that to me feels a little bit like melancholia, results from facing this map of destruction, a map that seems hard and unpreventable. However, even when faced with the inevitability of this hard future, Trivedi can't help looking, or he can't help writing, not out of some kind of hope, but something that is, to me, feels much more ingrained in the act of writing itself. The cliche from Auden, "Poetry makes nothing happen," is wrong, because in these poems, that nothing definitely is something. The ruins are, after all, wonders. And that something is what kept me reading throughout this book, straight through. So I'm really pleased, proud, and eager to hear from from Amish. Amish, take over.
Hi, good evening. And yeah, it was 2004 that I had Johannes's class, so you can do the math. And neither one of us had hair. Anyway, I'm going to read just a bunch of random parts, sort of pieces that go together from FuturePanic. There was time and time enough to trade places with your body on the side of that road, for you to be here instead of me, to trade in for the corpse you became for the specter I am, haunting the spaces where we used to go. There was time that was not time to say what we couldn't accept, to save a dying world by walking across it, by letting the pavement cut and burn your bare feet. Those were my feet. That was my body ignored and cracked against the cracked slab of glass. I'm the shatter pattern, a scattering of shards that was tempered to keep from hurting everyone. I stood in a room and looked at all the things in it, things that had been bought, given, taken. I am just as guilty. We are not guilty because the house is divided. We are guilty because we are the ones that divided it. Dying this way may have been easy enough, but we're living in a denial that cannot hold itself together forever, even if it can replicate itself endlessly by draining us, a planet, a star, a cow, a child, an earth of all resources, a parasite, our disease, spreading out across a galaxy for millions of years after we've already killed ourselves and left evidence in the only graveyard no one can find. This is the powder keg going up. A voice screams down a hallway only the quietest words, the depth of a well that dries with every drink. There is no displacement of silence, the din of missing memory. Lost in the mix, the fiber sounds that become a symphony, one expects to unhear. In the quarry, drowning, skin flayed, and a body recognized by every priest that calls to God. The invention of a way to measure time is of immediate suspicion, a sense that the turn in our lyric is every new scab left to be picked. The coming tortures are in the language of the oppressed, a wild sentence that's strangled beyond the mind. Distance deceives, teasing a distortion, a folding in of time which binds the ends of words into new aggressions. In the mix, listen for an unusual echo which never washed away. Panic undoes us, turns eyes into their own refractions, leaving them to twist the tiniest of lenses into new focus. Fault is a hyper-awareness of one's disease. The sun will swallow everything, so drink the ocean whole. What's fertile now will later be barren, starving for want. Nuclei will shrivel. Where we're going to, I don't mind. It's refreshing to deserve awful things for all the awful things we've done. There are original sins that can be washed away, just not the ones already known. Even the stars we look at will shift away, direction losing meaning. What wonders are we standing on over here, the ruins of a lost civilization, a roadmap for our destruction? No help is needed in learning how to place lines across people, across imagined divides, borderlines across a face you can't see. The earth was asking for it. Patriarchy is warm and protects and lets everything carry on. Anything is all right. Everything is permitted in an abyss of void, and it is perfectly normal to receive a gift and then crack along it, torque it to death. Criticism isn't censorship, and piety is not a source of knowledge either. Draw lines in asphalt just to divide a you from a me. In the end, it will all be more complicated as nothing, one thing, everything yoked together, causing only one keel over. These strands are those strands are binding and holding down. The future is a kind of oppression. the universe a kind of constraint, memory pushing and dragging around. All these things are happening at once. The moments after this one are an anomaly, not because they are available, but because they are locked. It's the moments after that are really unknown. There are few traumas that are entirely shocking. Dreaming in infinite tracks, the months have ceased. I endure noise because I cannot become the horizon. I was reading from some bits and pieces of this at MLA in 2017, and Johannes was there, and he sat really quietly in the back of the car afterwards, and he's like, "You've become very precise." And at first, I was really put off by that, and I decided to go back through the manuscript and try to make it more of what I wanted it to be, and I realized that the only way to get over it was to just lean into it, was just to become even more sort of measured and precise in that way. I still don't know exactly what he meant, but I took it as offensive anyway. Plants are cut for growth. I edge back the veins at the surface. I can feel otherwise, but I know I want to keep on trusting just enough. The crisis of time is a paradox. There is too little and too much of it, and all of it is a burden, and all of it sinks into the places in the soil where burial of an artifact creates an absence, a remainder. The whole in time is at the center of whatever is gazed upon, an outward dilation, a refraction of space. Time surrounded in darkness, there is no future, no narrative that extends beyond the moment. Cut the edges to let time grow anew in the severed places. The future is a kind of capital. The desire for more is too. The future is capital that only generates more, but leaves without an embrace. The crisis of time existed before Greenwich, before trains, but not necessity. Destroying the observatory would not have stopped time, only its measurement, its codification. Time would still oppress. The crisis of time began when particulates began swirling synchronously around a void at the center that could not be imagined. We are dilation. The crisis of time is that there's not much of it, and none of it belongs to anyone. Time cannot be exchanged, ephemera. The crisis of time, the lethargy caused by a delusion of its abundance and the awareness of scarcity. Time in crisis, time without future in an artifact buried that reminds of what should have been. There is no future when we stop expecting it. The future is inexact in the moments leading to crisis, to panic. The only immunity to the present is a crisis coming. The future oppresses by being a specter when it refuses to loom, negation. The future is a panic that oppresses by looming from behind. There is no ambiguity when we speak about time. There is no... I knew I was going to mess this up. There is no percipience of time's passage, or of Earth's rotation, or of hieing through space. We are only aware of the sequelae. No one can treat the effects of time. Time invokes crisis by cutting and refusing to grow in the spaces sunlight reaches. The oppression of time is constant, the guard at the center of the panoptic tower refusing to unsee into each cell. When it seems to go on forever, time metastasizes around the body. When it seems to go on forever, time infiltrates every cell and decays it. Time is unreal until there is scaffolding to hold and measure it. Time is not the rate of change, but the acknowledgement of it. Time is an awareness of being, an actuator of our understanding of being. But an event which is now present was future and will be past. But I do not hear you, even breathing deeply, the death rattle of a universe, a heat death, my lungs wheeze. All of time has already happened, or there is no time beyond the moment one is in. This is the inside of time. The past absorbs resources and replicates itself as future. This is the inside of time, and the future is a series of past mechanisms already in motion. This is the inside of time, and the experience of it decays each second. The camera, fulgent, concretizes a moment, an experience which will not return. It was never there to begin with. All of time has already happened, and I'm too scared to watch. Crisis is stop time. Oxon, parts move and replicate without propulsion. The clanking replicator, artificial self, remainder of misprision from long before. If you can see me, I can see you too. Listen, I speak as clearly as I can. The silence is unnecessary, as is action. We are the oxon of a play so many acts in that our curtain is falling. Panic is other people. My fear isn't dying. It's that whatever life is isn't much in a universe that goes on undefinable. The mechanism fires until it does not. Heart rate increases until it stops. Tree or wall or river is to car. The moments of urgency, the heart beats until it's stopped. A panic overtakes, seizes up, pressure chokes, veins constrict, shred. Blood flow restricted is more force, destruction arriving preconfigured in a history of crises. When working correctly, the stress subsides, pressure equalizes. A slight panic is the first rupture. But if crisis never stops, but if crisis never resolves itself, but if crisis is all there is, there are no resolutions, only more crises coming on. Sometimes things are born in fire, are of the ashes. To obsess over time is a fetish. To whisper into it another. The future is a fetish that oppresses, and when there is no future, the present oppresses instead. When the present oppresses, the past is idealized, its entries into memory a fetish. I am tickled by memory, as the past cannot see what is not there, the absence of the spectre of the future. I am being buried alive. I didn't know that we die in pieces. The body revolts against its housing, the science of my lenses and nails. In my sexual fantasies, I'm a capitalist. A desire to be interred in chalk in a math of revolutions, another reason to remain abjure artifacts. The reasons for being quiet diminish us. The future is oppressive in two ways. When there is no future, and when the future is overwhelmingly certain. If parallax or intangible. Whatever hides beyond crisis is crisis and panic, a panic which will not stop until the moment lapses, until what is beyond the future becomes known, acknowledged. The leaves are falling, but I'm not afraid because I know they will cover me. There will be no discovery or recovery. Just two more sections, I promise. At night, we lay dying, imagining all the panics of death. Breath, slowing, stopping. Arms, falling slack, cold. This panic floods continually. The delta of an avulsing river that drowns every town in its path. Whatever river persists flows not for itself, but to grow new life in the flood. And at night we imagine the world as it is, without us, something which sustains for the next permutation. There is a future that is not for me, and a present that goes right up to it. The ways in which death becomes idealized. The end of pain, the end of suffering, the sweetness of an afterlife, or of nothingness, or of peace, or of home, or of safety, or of being reunited, or of renunciation, or of the end of time, the end or of time, the end of or diaspora of time, the diaspora or colonization of or by time. And at night we lay dying, the real beyond fantasy constructed. I escape into dreams of an ideal life extant without the parallax of day to obfuscate. A perfect version of being that is only limited by what we fail to imagine. There are no ethics in a fantasy space, no constructions beyond the structures which we can't see around. The initial utterances of a sonnet, the first syllable as it cuts. I see where we are, us as we are. I see us in an idealized version of the world which can never express its own reality. Fantasy bleeds through the membrane of sleep, but only when a moment reaches its threshold, and I can't escape my own artifice of escape. My secret is that I know I would not say no. I rub the blade across the lips because I know I would not say no. The abyss seduces terror, desire unfulfilled. Sometimes you have to stand in the center of the flood so no one else drowns. So at night, when we envision a death of the present stream and flood it with a new ideal river, a fantasy constructed of remnant threads, old wounds are cauterized. They heal in the realm of the fantasy, all destruction sealed into the mise-en-scène of a life that only exists in the liminality of sleep. My secret is knowing that to blow the windows of life out by throwing a grenade into the middle of the house would be easy. The revolution is always easy. It's the new status quo that's impossible to predict. The blade touches the tongue, and all the ways to escape into the world are no longer obscured. What seduces is not the promise of a new life, but the destruction of the old, a dying house demolished for a new development. The fantasy life is not one of future abundance, but one missing the scaffolding of the present. A beautiful abyss has opened at the center of a galaxy that had stopped spinning for itself. To avoid destruction, the planets and the stars and dust and remnants of their creation spin again, rotate around themselves again, and generate a gravity again. A momentum that ties everything away from collapsing into nothing. To deconstruct is to lose a center. I put a little chaos into my life and I found out I like it. My secret is that the boredom to preserve is greater than the desire to destroy. The grenade's pin seduces. I wrap my finger through the loop and know how to pull. Instead, I leave damaged the one thing I can. Wake into the same fantasy fallen asleep in. Deeper reflection of panic submerged in diegetic spaces. The flood returns because there is only chaos in this water. The flood cannot wash away everything. I don't believe in God, but I do believe in sin. The flood does not carry forgiveness in its waters. Without a God, there is no forgiveness. Water's patterns and physics are like time, the schema for all matter in the universe. The greatest gift is not time. It's escaping from it. It's time ceasing and holding the breath back, the heart in the middle of a beat. I want you always, just at the tip of my fingers, at the furthest. I stopped breathing so my lungs stay in focus. I am alive in a yes, an utterance that cuts, a provocateur leading myself into the deepest water, the ground a blur to all who cannot be the only ones to drown. Thank you.
Thank you, Amish. And to both of you. I was thinking we could have just, if anybody have questions for the two poets, you could raise your hand and just ask it or show yourself. Anybody have questions for the poets we just heard?
There's one with their hand up, Johannes.
Yep, Alina, go ahead. You can just unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi. So I had a question for Amish. I was interested in the way that this poetry book looks at duration itself. So I was thinking about the semantics of crisis, of emergency, which imply a acute short duration, and what happens to the meaning of the word crisis, for example, when it doesn't have that duration, and if how duration and whether duration came into your thinking, and if there were any particular thinkers that were influencing it.
Yeah, thank you. I did try. It does play around with that idea a lot, because I purposely sort of, I think when you're dealing with anxiety in general, I think what seems like it may be a momentary thing is something that's often building up in a day, in a week, in a month, or whatever. So I was trying to purposely play, you're right, with the ways in which things come to points, but it always sort of feels like if one is to sort of examine backwards, again, it sort of, back to the discussion of whether or not when is time existing. What is this sort of question of when do these things begin? And I think for me, a lot of this book is an exploration through my own coming to understand that aspect of myself, because I'd never dealt with it at all as a human being, and started dealing with it around the time that I started the book, and realized it wasn't that I went from 0 to 10, it's that I was always at 8.5, just waiting for that kind of gentle tip. And I felt like playing with time there, and then time's own anxieties, I think, for me, just started to blur together. Like, when is one thing beginning? When is one ending? When are we, in a moment of crisis? When are we out of it? Sometimes it feels like, especially the last several years of our political economy, we're sort of always in crisis. But then the question for me is, aren't we always in crisis? So, I do play with it. I think I play with it hopefully a little bit in the book. But it is one of those things that I was worried about when titling the book. Like, FuturePanic, is it an instantaneous thing? Is it a building thing? And I really want it to feel like it's this building emotion.
Great, thank you. Mary, do you want to? You can unmute yourself.
Thank you both so much. That was really incredible. My question is for Madison. So I first encountered your work watching it on videos of the FREAKOPHONE World and the CRYPTODRONE Sequence. And I think what I've just been so awestruck by is how much of a complex world your poems really build and become, like a world that has its own linguistic rules and all these different mediums that you work in. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how this world, sort of like the existence of it, first came into your consciousness, and even like, writing through a being like the CRYPTODRONE, what that was like for you when you were first starting and kind of building it out.
Hi, thanks, Mary. That's a good question. Yeah, I think that when I was first writing it, I was really taken with like people, or I was really moved by someone like Dorothea Lasky, who is, who's really writing as though the like the poem is a demon, and this is, she has these talks about it. But and I think that conceit still that applies to me and like in my own writing process. But I also think that like the more I think about it, I think it was really just it came from just colliding language. So that's yeah. So somebody in one of my classes my poetry classes said of Asa Berg, because I was teaching Asa Berg, that language it's pretty much like a series of car crashes. And I don't know if that's necessarily what was happening for me, but I think that every once in a while a phrase would just generate enough energy, and I felt like it needed to stay. I don't know that it was systematic like the way that fiction writers talk about world building. So it wasn't like I had a chart with the language that I was using. It was more just what terms felt like they were doing the most work, and then I would end up coming back to them. But it wasn't super systematic.
Paul, do you want to unmute yourself?
I think I'm unmuted now. I already put a question in the chat, but I can just reread the question. I've heard Madison read before. Tonight was my first time hearing Amish. I think you're both excellent readers. You both read with this sometimes pain, sometimes animated urgency. You both clearly know what your poems want to sound like off the page. And I think Amish answered earlier part of what I asked in the chat regarding, I said that you both read your poems as though there's so much at stake, and no doubt there is. And Amish said, always writing in a state of crisis, always. So my final question is, do you frequently read your poems aloud? Do you read your poems aloud as you draft new lines? Do you have advice for writers who want to take their public reading skills to the next level? Because you're both such excellent readers.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I have very much advice about doing that. I do think that, okay, here's what I'll say. I do think that for me, when I am reading, I feel as though I can sort of hide behind the poem. And maybe this is another reason why when I was initially writing that book, that I wanted to write in a different voice, because then when I read it, it's not me reading, it's the speaker. I mean, maybe a lot of people think that way, but I mean, I'm somebody who I think really struggles with public speaking, or I've historically struggled with it. So I think that was sort of one way out of it. I think, okay, the only other thing I would say is that one thing that can help other, maybe younger students of poetry, is that if you sort of start with the sounds, if you don't imagine the sound as something that, I don't know how to explain it. If you don't imagine it as something that you're performing for people, but as something that's sort of coming, of something that's, now this isn't gonna, yeah, I was gonna say something that's sort of coming from within, but that sounds really cheesy. But I guess just start with the sound. Amish?
I was going to say, Madison, don't stop now. Don't worry about what's inside. But this is the first project, I guess I want to use that word, where I actually did spend a lot of time trying to read it out loud, as not like each line, but definitely like there were. When one opens it, one will see that there are lots of like sections and you know, individual pages, but pages that bleed. So, I mean, there's like chunks of space. And so I would start out and I would read them out loud. I was at the time that I was working, I was living alone, and I was like just trying to fill the space with noise. And so I just started doing that, and I never thought I would be the kind of person that would actually want to do those things. So it became a fun way of sort of just hearing the words. And I thought, okay, well, when I throw this away, I'll get back to my normal way of doing it. You know, just, you know, pen and paper and not saying anything out loud and never hearing it. Madison said something really perfect, which is it became a way of hiding in the text away, because I was trying to start dealing with like all these, you know, whatever things I had like unlocked. And so I felt like it was a great place to like just tuck myself away and then put the like language and performance a little bit more up front. And so it became a way of hiding. I'm thinking about, you know, Dylan in Rolling Thunder Review, like painting his face white and going out on tour, like as a way of just like separating himself one more step from the audience, even though he's out there playing guitar, like it's still him, but it's just like one like extra barrier. And I think for me, this in here, it became that. Yeah, I don't think until I really started going back over the sections that I started realizing that there was like a pattern and like a rhythm to it. So, I don't know. I think it's fun. I used to hate it. I used to make fun of people for it. I used to be a terrible person. I probably still am, but I take it. I enjoy it now. So. Yeah,
it's interesting that both of you say that. Then usually the way it's talked about is like you write a poem and then you add. Then you perform it, whereas in both cases it's like you're saying that the sound and the performance is part of the composition, which is interesting. I mean, Amish, you can really hear that in your poem with this like repetition, like it really sounds like somebody sitting alone in a room trying to kind of write their way out of something or through something. So, Jace, do you want to ask? Jace, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. So yeah, I mean that was all great. My question is for Madison. I feel like there's these really brilliant like sci-fi and horror moments like, you know, throughout. And I'm just wondering how those sort of figure into your work. You can get nitty-gritty or philosophical or whatever, but if it's also just like a list of movies that I need to check out to pair with the book, that's cool too.
Yeah, I don't know. Wait, is your question sort of, you know, am I thinking acrostically, or is it more, how do I think about genre?
I mean, those seem similar to me, but maybe that's just reveals something about how I work. But yeah, I mean, I do wonder if there's like acrostic stuff in here. I mean, even this coming from the film versions, you know, like how does horror or sci-fi film figure into that? Or, you know, with those movies, like I also have wondered whether they came out as sort of like poem films, or whether there was like film creeping into the poems or poems creeping towards film. I don't know if I'm actually ultimately asking a question here or just noticing, but I'm just curious how it ends up in this book for you.
Yeah, I think that initially I wasn't, at least when I was writing that, when I was writing that book, I wasn't really thinking that much about films or making video poems or anything like that. That was I think the video poems helped me as I was making them, sort of helped me suss out something about the space of the poem. So I guess what I would say is that when I did decide to start making video poems, those clarified some things for me. But in terms of like the sci-fi and horror that's happening in it, I mean, maybe that just has to do with, I mean, because I was starting with this conceit of, you know, there being some type of demon or like the something from like the upside down place in Stranger Things. I think that instead of trying to write from that space and just reach the reader where they are, I think leaning into that sort of maybe brought out these different generic textures. But I also think, you know, I mean, I mean, both Amish and I've both studied with Johannes, and I mean, Asabe's book writing has had an influence on me for sure. So I mean that there's that too.
I think also the videos that Jace mentioned and that I mentioned in the introduction, those are on your website, right? If people are interested. Yeah, I really recommend looking at those, and in the book there are like stills from those, but they're really super interesting. All right, looks like that is it for questions. Thank you both of you so much. Thanks for writing the book, for reading for us. Thank you everybody who showed up. So yeah, goodbye.